Indiana Jones, The Dial of Destiny is out. Well, it's down and out. That's what it is. It's dead. Now that Barbenheimer has arrived, the final nail in the coffin is in. And Harrison Ford's Indiana Jones, Dial of Destiny, Kathleen Kennedy and James Mangold and everybody else who was involved in this, it should be an embarrassment. Now, in the post-mortem, we're looking back in time at this film, at its launch, and we're wondering, should this have been put back in the bay? Was it even worth it to put in theaters, or should they have just shuttered it and said, we'll take the loss? That's how bad this is. All right, folks, welcome back to another video of excellence here on the WDW Pro channel. It's all we know how to do. Some of those out there hate us for it, but guess what, folks? You deserve this kind of content, and we intend to bring it to you. Joining us and lifting the entire discourse up to that level of excellence we need is Culture Casino, and from thatparkplace.com, investigative reporter over there, Jonas J. Campbell. Welcome back to both of you. How are you?
Well, doing rather well. I'm very excited to be here. I'm not excited about the subject matter.
I am alive, so alive and full of goo.
Well, that makes you better than Harrison Ford's Indiana Jones, The Dial of Destiny, although I'm uncertain about the goo. All right, folks, one thing I am certain about, if you would like to help us out, consider clicking that like button, share, subscribe, and when you click it, you stick it to the algorithms. It is the notification bell. We begin our journey today by taking a look at the numbers. That's literally thenumbers.com as we view Indiana Jones, The Dial of Destiny. This is the wrap-up, folks. This thing may still be in theaters, but it is, well, it's done. And it may garner perhaps a few more million, but again, it's done. It has failed to reach even $350 million. I thought that the bottom for this thing was $400 million. Paulie from Latino Slant gave me a correction after he had seen it and said, no, it's bad enough that it may not break 400, but we are in uncharted territory. Remember that this film is one of the most expensive films ever made. We surmise, based on its financials, that it needed something like $900 to $1 billion. That's $900 million to $1 billion in order to break even. Not just to make a profit, but to break even. It currently sits at $334 million. And so now the discussion we need to have, and we will have, is should Disney have simply held on to this thing and not released it in theaters, or perhaps even just put it on Disney Plus once it was finished in order to have saved all of their marketing costs? Because it's so bad now that it may have actually been better for Disney to have never put this in the theaters even after it was created. Culture, you and I were having a conversation about this, and I stopped us and I said, wait a minute. You know, we're in a high intensity conversation here. This is very interesting. It's novel, and we need to stop and do this in a video, lest we have the conversation already. And so that's what we're doing. Culture, tell me why I believe you think that Disney would have been better served simply shelving this, or perhaps putting it on streaming at some point and saving completely on all the marketing and everything. Walk me through it.
Well, I feel they would have been far better off had they just sat on it, never released it. I think that, you know, beyond the marketing budget, they've damaged a brand, one of the last ones that they have, or the last one that they have at Lucasfilm that actually lives underneath the banner. And I think that it created a situation where it will be very difficult for them to reboot it. They can't even go after, the reboot with this Helena lady that they were actually trying to do, because it's just so damaged at this point. Financially, it put them in such a bind because of the marketing. This is a time at which they really can't afford to waste money, and spending several $100 million on the marketing budget alone, on top of the $329 million they spent to make the film. It's all good money after bad, and they need as much as they can. This Hulu thing is still hanging around their necks like a lead weight. So had they just left it alone and stopped damaging the overall brand of Lucasfilm, and more specifically Indiana Jones, they would have been far better off, and they would have retained the value of Lucasfilm if it is indeed true that they're looking to shed different elements of the company in order to try to save it.
Absolutely.
I just want to add some figures in there because I wasn't part of the original conversation, and yet I'm here hanging on like a skin tag.
Go ahead, Jonas.
We're looking at obviously a $500 million deficit here between what they received and what they probably paid in order to make this film. And when a movie like this is made, especially when they're made in the UK, we get to see how much it costs to make the film. And we also see that they took out loans in order to make films like this. We don't have the specifics on everything, but they are probably on the hook for the entire production of the film. We also don't know if they took out a loan to pay for marketing of the film. So when we look at that, I don't think they owe $500 million on this, but well, maybe they do actually. Now that I think about the fact that the distributors are not paying them the full amount that they got in box office.
Well, let's run through those numbers, okay? So let's play it out. We know this thing costs something like $329, but I suspect it may have went a little bit higher because of the reshoots that we found out happened later. So I'm suspecting this cost something like $350 million for production, which is insane. The other Indiana Jones movies, even adjusted for inflation, cost nothing like this. But this is what happens when you attempt to de-age someone with CGI to reduce them by 2 or 3 years using CGI makeup, what I call it. But when you do that for an entire film, that's the kind of cost you can incur. It's also the kind of cost you can incur when you have an almost 80-year-old man attempting to perform stunts on a moving train, and then he gets injured and is out for 6 to 8 weeks during the pandemic. That will drive the cost up. Now,
right. And to add more context to that, we're not talking about the de-aging at the beginning of the film where it was, decades. We're talking about a slight de-aging that was throughout the film to make old Harrison Ford look like slightly less old Harrison Ford.
Exactly. And then on top of that, so you got the 350. We have heard reports that they pulled the marketing all the way down to 100 million, which is low for this film. We've heard that. So let's go with that because that's the low number, right? So we're going to give them all due deference we possibly can. And we're going to say that the total cost for this film, $450 million. Okay. Now that puts it at 900 million to break even. That's the low level, folks. That's why we said it's 900 to $1 billion. I suspect it's actually closer to $1 billion. That's what we've seen out of all of these films. When we get years later, the real paperwork and the real numbers, we find out, oh, this was way more expensive than they admitted at the time. But let's go with the lowest possible, $900 million. All right, now they've made $330 million back, right? So that's what we see out of the numbers. So if they've made 330 back, they don't get the full 330, okay? They get how much, Jonas?
I don't have Mike Canool's spreadsheet. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say his full name. I don't have Mexican Iron Man's spreadsheet here, but I mean, let's just say 150. I don't really know the numbers on the back end here, but the international box office, I think I've heard they're bringing in maybe as low as 25% of that in the domestic box office. Not much. Actually, this didn't perform well in China, so maybe that international box office number is a little higher.
Right, so let's be as fair as we possibly can. Again, we're going to give them all due deference possible. Let's say that it's pulled in $170 million actually into Disney, okay? So at the box office, it's made this amount, but a certain amount went to the theaters, went to taxes, etc. Let's say that it's made 170. All right, now, culture. I mean, this is how we figure out exactly how much the movie is lost. So we think it cost $450 million total, right? So that's the production, that's the marketing. And so far, we think that it's made something like 170. So just to make the math really easy, they're currently probably at a loss of about $300 million off this one film. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, the one thing we aren't taking into account is some of the tax write-offs that they received during the course of production in the UK and some of the other countries that they filmed in, which, obviously it offsets some of the expense there. But I think that's a fair number. I think if you're just doing it purely on that without any of the tax, without any of the tax numbers.
Sure.
I think that's a fair number. Although I do believe there's probably about $60 million to $70 million worth of tax savings that they had along the way. I mean, I'm trying to give them every.
Yeah, let's pull it down to 250. A quarter. So now we're down to $250 million in losses on this film. Okay. Yeah. Now the question becomes, and this is what we're here to discuss. If they had just put this on Disney Plus. Okay, let's say they shelve it, they put it on Disney Plus, then what would have happened is that they would have saved the $100 to $150 million in marketing. Maybe it's more, but at least that number, they saved that. So you shave that down to $1.50 if they just put it on Disney Plus. Not only that, but they would have saved the humiliation because other than the Nielsen numbers, which very few people are ever going to hear about, right? It's the folks who watch this channel who are very interested in that sort of thing. Outside of the Nielsen numbers, you're not going to have the headlines over and over and over talking about what a dismal failure this has been. So, in my personal opinion, and this this is just so amazing to even say, they would have been better off taking whatever financial penalties they would have received from the cinemas for doing this and just putting this on streaming, or completely shelving it and taking a tax write-down to say this wasn't even worth putting onto the big screen.
I'm with you, because I'm still going to say that they did not only the financial damage that obviously it's apparent. I mean, it's pretty easy to look at the numbers like we just did and break them down, but the brand damage that they did is incalculable at the moment. They've had such a dismal record with film releases across the board. It doesn't matter the nameplate studio that they're using. It's that specifically Lucasfilm, which has not had a winner in a long time, whether it be on Disney Plus or out in theaters. They've really done tremendous damage to this brand. And I don't.
Well, let's examine that damage.
Yeah.
Okay, because that's has to be weighed into the cost here.
Yeah.
So Star Wars is not dead. I mean, there are some who would say it's dead. Jonas has said it many times. But
I was halfway joking, but it's become more true as time has gone on.
But here's the reason it's not dead. Because they continue to make more Star Wars. Now, is it financially viable? Probably not. Or at least you would have to scale it way, way down. So it's on life support. You could bring it back in 5 years, 6 years under new leadership, right? You could completely swap it. So maybe that's what I'm trying to say. It could be brought back in the future after a long duration and with new leadership. Here's what dead looks like, though. I don't know how you ever bring back Indiana Jones. I think this has just killed the franchise. I mean, there is no interest whatsoever. You might need to take 15 to 20 years to even bring back Indiana Jones, and then nobody's going to care anyway. So that's the kind of dead we're talking about.
I think.
Go ahead.
I think you have to reboot it with a different actor at this point. There was some hope of that with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but I don't think Shia LaBeouf decided that they were going to end the Indiana Jones franchise right there with that movie. As far as any hopes of rebooting it, I make a joke about his unkind comments toward the film itself and Steven Spielberg. And Steven Spielberg said, "Oh, okay, well, forget about you. We're not going to give you one of the most cherished film properties of all time to be the helmer of it." Now it is officially run into the ground. You have Indiana Jones. You've solidified it as there was no one else. You have Indiana Jones, and he is back with his wife after, all these years of sadness, and he's riding off into the sunset, or whatever you want to take from that horrible ending. I think that this is the official end. They have said Indiana Jones is this one guy. Star Wars has that multi-generational aspect where you can say, okay, yes, the Force has awakened, and here's a new crop of people who have access to, quote unquote, the Force. Indiana Jones doesn't have that. It was very centered on Harrison Ford's performance and very centered on the actions of one specific person, his legacy, his history of archaeology. And it's pretty obvious I almost said Helena Bonham Carter. Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Helena Shaw character. It might be good with Helena Bonham Carter. Pretty obvious she doesn't have the charm to take on this franchise. So,
well, if you want to know how unpopular she is, imagine if she were the one who was playing Barbie and how it would have gone versus Margot Robbie. And that'll tell you what a horrible casting choice this was. Now we're talking about damage. Here's the damage, folks. This out of ScreenRant, which is not a website we usually go to for this kind of stuff or any kind of stuff, but hey, we'll go for it there. ScreenRant, Stephen Barker, we probably like him a lot. Indiana Jones 5's $300 million failure means Harrison Ford's 3 franchise exits were all box office disappointments. So we've got Han Solo, we have Indiana Jones, And then we also have
Blade Runner.
The name escapes me. Blade Runner. Thank you.
Deckard.
Yes. And so it says Indiana Jones: The Dial of Destiny bombed at the box office, which means that all three of Harrison Ford's major character exits have been disappointing. Indy had a definitive ending in Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade by riding off into the sunset, and he had another definitive ending by marrying Marion. Now that's a tongue twister. And settling down in Indiana Jones: Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and it was that one that got me on the tongue twisting. Darn it! Nevertheless, a fifth Indiana Jones movie has arrived, which once again attempts to give the character heartwarming farewell. Of course, it did not. Here's the thing, guys. What we're looking at here is not only did this do damage to Lucasfilm, not only did it essentially bury Indiana Jones, but this is the trifecta of harming the legacy of Harrison Ford. So it may have even been in his best interest when this thing was all said and done to look at it and go, James Mangold, this is not worth putting out. Salty Nerd Podcast had this right. We're going to put it on streaming, or we're just going to take the tax write-down. How much damage do you think this does to the legacy of Harrison Ford, if at all?
Wow, that's a tough question. I think it really hurt his overall. What people think of him overall. It'll be hard to hand him a lifetime achievement award because of the last three performances that he was involved in. And I don't know necessarily that it's his acting, although it was rather shaky in two of those three films, as far as I'm concerned. But at a certain point, you need to move on and play different characters. And I think an actor can be equally responsible for that, knowing when the time is up as a production house or a studio. They should know better, and he should have known better. I still think there was no upside for the indie film, and there really wasn't an upside for Harrison Ford. So I guess that's as plain as I can say it.
Culture, I also don't understand why did they feel the need with all of these Harrison Ford characters to make them very what would you say, gruff,
decrepit?
Grumpy, harsh, decrepit,
Dodgy, yeah,
yes, and defeated. Like why did Han Solo have to be defeated? Why did Indiana Jones have to be defeated? I don't quite understand why that was necessary. That seems to go, well, let me say this. So like if you look at Obi-Wan Kenobi, right, in the original trilogy, he's not defeated. Look what all he's been through. And the man's not defeated. He still is inspiring. He still is sacrificing. He's happily imparting his wisdom to the next generation. What is up with this idea that we have to turn old people into absolute sad sacks of patheticness?
Well, don't forget they did have an Obi-Wan Kenobi series where they came back and finished the job on that.
Yeah, that's right. They retroactively made sure he was a sad sack in his middle-aged era.
Yeah, it's a real shame as my voice goes away. It's a real shame though that we're seeing what we're seeing, but it's not. It's driven by something else we don't like to talk about on this channel, and I mean, there's a lot of reasoning behind this is to essentially disempower men. I mean, that's what the Barbie movie was. That's what all of these representations of these characters are, is to remove male heroes. And I mean, Indiana Jones, male hero. You got Han Solo, male hero. And it's not like these people, these characters weren't without flaws. They were, but sometimes you can be deeply flawed and still be a hero at the end of the day. And every single one of these characters that Harrison Ford has played, for the most part, that's exactly what they were. But now you have to tear down your heroes. It's a lot of people want to undermine everything that came before so they can rebuild the world in their own image. And you have to make the bad guys the heroes now.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I would say James Mangold did a great job of that with Logan, but that was a character that has a basis in being flawed. He is an anti-hero, and therefore it belongs in that space. And I think Mangold is a guy that kind of likes to deconstruct heroes. That being said, I don't know that these people are actively trying to preach for the destruction of masculinity, or whether or not they just believe all the hype, and that's where they live, and that's just where they set their baseline, and therefore they need to write stories from that. The problem is, of course, they are coming from these franchises. Well, I don't want to say Blade Runner, because Blade Runner is a dystopian sci-fi. Star Wars and also Indiana Jones have a basis in hope. the John Williams score. Anything that you look at in that is good versus evil. There's hope. There's dastardly villains that need to be defeated. Indiana Jones in the Hole, it belongs in a museum. There's a message, there's an underlying message there of the preservation of history and the preservation of all these older things. It comes from a place of positivity and fighting against darker forces. Whereas this one is so strange. The pathos of the film, we say pathos on this channel because it sounds cooler, seems to be that Indiana Jones is the relic, and we need to restore him to what he once was. But by restoring him to what he once was, foolishly, again, back to that end scene, it just shows that he was pathetic for decades. And that is not, that's not what we want to leave the movie theater thinking. We want to leave the movie theater thinking, oh, look, Indiana Jones has to go off and rescue Brody, who barely knows how to ride a horse, as they go away from the temple in Last Crusade. That is a hopeful, fun, maybe they're going to go off on another adventure kind of thing. And this one, well, I guess his wife's going to put up with him.
She's going to, yes, she's going to do his laundry.
I think hang on. I still think that's rather presumptive. I wouldn't suggest that we actually know what's going to happen at the end with those two.
Fair.
And I think they left us without a hopeful message in the end. I mean, every single other opportunity, all of these films and their franchises and most of the things Disney's ever been involved with, we gave you some hope at the end, if not some joy. We haven't had a satisfying ending from any of these films coming out of Disney, most specifically, but I would argue most of Hollywood for a very long time because of that deconstructionism, which I just call absolute destructionism. And that's unfortunate, but I think you're spot on there, Jonas. I really do.
So here's something, and this is a slightly different topic, but we need to go there because of what you just said. With the Barbie movie, we're going to be watching to see what happens in the second and the third weekends as the general audiences realize that this movie is perhaps not aimed at small children and perhaps is not non-divisive, let's say. And you're talking about how Hollywood doesn't, you're talking about how Hollywood doesn't know how to give us a positive ending other than some of these films like Top Gun Maverick, Mario, these very positive films. But I wonder what's going to be the cost to the Barbie movie by the fact that it couldn't just come together and say, women are great, men are great. Like, let's all get along. And instead, it just pummeled this idea that men are bad and women are good. I don't know why that Hollywood seems to be determined to do divisive content. And I don't know what the overall financial cost for them doing so is, but it can't be minor. And I would think that the investors out there would have some sort of interest in Hollywood doing a much better job in presenting something that is universally beloved by audiences. How much does it drive away the male demographic if you hammer on men an entire film, and give no positive spin about them at all? And how much does it dampen the audience if you present their, favorite action star, but you've presented him in a old curmudgeon-y way? It can't be good.
Well, I can say that in this particular case, and perhaps in almost all of the Lucasfilm properties, a lot of the earnings is outside of the movie theaters. It's in merchandise. It's in physical items. Action figures.
There's no merchandise for this one. I mean, they tried, but it's not moving off the shelves.
It isn't. And then, but most specifically, because you referred to Barbie, Barbie is it's the biggest brand for Mattel. I don't think anybody realizes that of the $5.1 or $5.3 billion, depending upon the year, that Mattel earns as a company, Barbie's 1/3 of those earnings.
And then, by the way, Hot Wheels would be very close behind, and then everything else is like way, way, way smaller than those two properties.
And so you've now had a Barbie movie, which there are some audience members that may have been completely, if not entirely, turned off. Both those words mean the same thing. So great job there, Casino. But they may have been turned off to the fact that, they'll ever buy another Barbie toy again or accessory. I mean, there are lots of other, playthings out there that you could hand off to your kids. So if you end up with a situation where this company has Heinerscheited itself when it comes to one of their biggest toy brands, or arguably
what a great word.
Yeah.
What a great word, pulling those out of the vocab.
Well, yeah. But if that were the case, then you could have a, similar to the largest consumer, alcohol brand here in the US, you could have the same situation.
That's the question is, what impact does this have on the toy sales for Mattel? And I think there will be some level of marketing of this. I mean, some level of market bump directly related to the film, but whether or not that will stick around and whether or not that also coincides with an alienation of the younger audience that was into Barbie. Bringing this back to Indiana Jones, I saw the action figures for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Why would I buy Indiana Jones that looks like he wants to sit in a recliner, all due respect to Harrison Ford, or would I rather buy Indiana Jones that looks like Indiana Jones as we remember him from the first three films? Or if you're trying to bring in a younger audience, I got to say, based on a market study of 4 kids, robots sell a lot better than old man Indiana Jones.
What about dinosaurs? Dinosaurs
do fantastic, and they always do.
Some dinosaurs.
Jurassic Park is always scooping in there as, okay, well, we're the first name in dinosaurs, so therefore keep buying our Jurassic Park toys. But the younger generation is not going to be interested in this. The toy market is aging up, and so you see these high-end collectibles. Well, the high-end collectibles market is probably not interested in Indiana Jones in his dotage. It's just not interesting to most people.
Yeah, one of the funniest things to me is that I was looking at the Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny merchandise. And so one of those items is a whip, right? And you would wonder, well, how are they going to make that where kids can play with it? Well, as badly as you can imagine. It's essentially like a ribbon dancer. So little boys are going to be playing with ribbon dancer whips. It was so terrible. It's just fabric. It was so bad. But a little bit of clarity here, folks. We know that there are going to be consequences for Indiana Jones, the Dial of Destiny, for its failure, for the failure that we've seen in Star Wars, and those things are coming. The Disney company is not in a place where they can continue to suffer these sorts of failures. And so yesterday we brought forth a video where we talked about some rumors and leaks that we had received. Of course, that's speculation. We can't verify them independently. But, one of the things that we talked about was that Kathleen Kennedy, we are hearing, will not seek an extension for her contract, which ends in 2024. We also talked about that Disney had reached out to Jon Favreau to see if he would take over the creative side of Lucasfilm, but that he allegedly has not given them an answer. We talked about a number of other things, but we just want to clarify when it comes to those rumors and leaks that there are a number of various rumors out there on the web. And folks, we specifically laid out a very normal set of rumors, right? That Kathleen Kennedy won't seek a contract extension, that Jon Favreau has been offered the creative side, that Disney is looking for someone to come in to run the business side of Lucasfilm, and that Kathleen Kennedy may stay on with no public announcement at all, no discussion of it for an additional 3 to 6 months if Disney needs the time to find someone to put in charge of Lucasfilm. That's it. None of the other stuff are we out there corroborating, verifying, etc. It's not that we're denying any of that other stuff that's out there on the web right now. We just want to be very careful in saying, hey, this is what we've got, and it's rather mundane in comparison to some of this other things you've heard. Something that is not mundane, though, that goes right along with the consequences issue of what's going on with Disney. And I want to show this. Jonas brought this to our attention right before we begin the video, is that Disney is considering delaying some movie releases because striking actors refuse to promote them. And this is out of Fortune, but it uses Bloomberg heavily. We'll read the first 2 paragraphs, and then we'll talk briefly about it as we wrap up this conversation. Walt Disney is reviewing its schedule of film releases through the rest of the year. By the way, folks, there's only 3. And may delay some titles because striking actors won't help promote their pictures, according to people familiar with the matter. The discussions are at an early stage, but could impact films including Poor Things, The Next Goal Wins, Wish, and Magazine Dreams. Of those, folks, I only know of Wish as having an actual theatrical release. which
Magazine
are all slated for
Dream.
release this year.
I'll add Magazine Dreams was once starring, I don't think it's starring now, Jonathan Majors. So I can see why that one might get pushed back.
You mean Jonathan Majors would not want to be out there promoting this in the midst of a strike and
no,
in the
I
midst
think
of his
that's
legal worries and
I think
woes?
that's the other way around. That maybe they don't want Jonathan Majors promoting their film right now. No comment on the veracity of the charges.
That's right. Well, and we presume innocence here. That's what we do for everybody because we think it's the right thing to do. But it looks to me, guys, like probably if they do delay, it's going to be Wish. Now, those other entities are just not big enough for us to care about. But Wish, of the 3 actual releases left, that's the only one I can see them actually moving. The Marvels, I think, is locked in. They've already done such heavy advertising for it. I don't know that it helps them for Brie Larson to be out there talking, so they may actually see this as a win that they're in the midst of a strike and she can't be on the press tour. And then, we've got Haunted Mansion coming out in just a couple days, right?
Man.
And they're not going to move that. So that's what we've got. Wish. If they're going to move a major theatrical thing, it's Wish. But let's end it here, guys. There are consequences, clearly, for the failures of Disney, for the failures of Lucasfilm, even to the point now that they're trying to move these releases. Jonas, I want to go to you, and then I'm going to culture the last word. But Jonas, explain to us the financial reasons that Disney might want to delay.
Well, because they have to spend $100 million marketing the film. If they put it out and nothing happens, then from their perspective, I think it would be like Strange World. That, there are people, when we talk about Strange World, they still get it confused with the Star Trek show, or they wonder what in the world that was. And I have to remind them, no, this is a Disney film. This is a Walt Disney animated feature film. The supposed pinnacle of animation in the world released a film, and you have not heard of it. That being said, it probably deserves to not be heard of. The $100 million that they would probably have to spend to market Wish comes at a time when they are trying to get together billions of dollars to buy Hulu. They have to buy Hulu. This is not they have a strong desire to buy Hulu. The last third of the from Comcast. They have to come up with somewhere between $9 billion and $25 billion in order to complete the purchase of Hulu by January. Their fiscal year ends, I think, 3 months before that. And they're holding on to anything they can, including cashing in large loans that they have out in order to find any money they have in the couch cushions right now. And releasing a film, especially one that is going to cost them hundreds of millions of dollars to release, is maybe not a great idea when you've got that big of a bill to pay in January.
And that is the sort of commentary that we love to have on the channel because it explains entertainment. It explains why Disney would seek to push a movie into the next year at a far, far higher resolution and veracity than what you'll get almost anywhere else. This has to do with Hulu. Culture, final thoughts on this. Let me set this up for you. Disney has to buy Hulu. Indiana Jones, The Dial of Destiny could have been a winner for them had it been made well. It's not. It's going to cost them. It makes it harder to buy Hulu. We've been discussing whether or not it even should have been put out there. You had brought up earlier, not in this video, but in discussions with us, that other Star Wars, other Lucasfilm streaming properties have had a very high cost. And yet they were put on Disney Plus. They didn't get a theatrical release. Final thoughts, culture, on Indiana Jones, how badly it has hurt Disney in terms of their ability to buy Hulu, and, should this have been shelved?
Unfortunately, well, my final answer there is, of course, it should have been shelved, or at least just at most it should have been on Disney Plus. And the reason being is this is one of those situations where it's death by 1,000 cuts. Disney is obviously, Indiana Jones was a terrible loss for them financially, but you have losses across the board. I mean, we spoke behind the scenes about Andor costing about $250 million to produce. It yielded nothing. They want to point towards maybe a growth or retention of subs. I would say that that's not entirely accurate. We're about to find out just how inaccurate it is as we get.
By the way, culture, don't want to cut you off, but guess what other Lucasfilm property is alleged to have a $250 million budget? The Acolyte.
Oh no,
That's not helping them either.
No, and this is because of not just the Hulu situation, but because they've been bleeding money for a long time. The last thing they need is more cuts. And I see, and I think you do as well, Haunted Mansion's going to underperform and cost them. It's not really been promoted, and that you can tell that Disney's hurting because their promotion, the windmill of promotion that they usually put behind all their films to put wind in the sails and blow them along in the marketplace, that hasn't been there. It's not been there for Haunted Mansion. It certainly hasn't been there for Wish. And I think Wish is kind of like a strange fever dream that nobody's going to really follow. And so does it surprise me that they're pulling these other films? No. I think Disney is finally at that point where they can't financially support the things that they've produced. And they were relying heavily on their big tentpoles this year to basically refill their coffers, which they haven't done. Indiana Jones would have been better to save the, let's be fair, as you suggested, they're 100 million to 150 million in marketing. Yeah, it really would have saved them a lot. And that could be said for many of the properties that they were released. But if they had honestly just taken Bob's words seriously, going back to, well, before he left, where they needed to reduce and the number of projects that they were putting together, specifically for Disney Plus and also theatrically, perhaps they'd be in a better situation now. But he didn't even take his own advice. So here we sit. But I think Indiana Jones ultimately made it very, very difficult for Disney to complete this purchase of Hulu. And I think that they may have to reach out to their normal media partner, the one that backs them up all the time, like Hearst Media. We'll see.
That's a great point. It turns out that failures have consequences. All of this lies at the feet of Bob Iger, Kathleen Kennedy, James Mangold, and everybody else who brought this film to fruition and to failure. And folks, we have been saying this for a very long time, that failures have consequences. The mainstream media just keeps on pumping out the idea that no, Disney's fine, Disney's fine. Now culture is saying they don't even have the money to promote their films anymore. And I think he's right. So that's where we are with this company. We have way more coverage coming on the Walt Disney Company later this week, including another huge scoop at the level of the Kathleen Kennedy scoop that we expect to bring to you all tomorrow. We're hoping to get final permissions on that, and then we will have it for you. Folks, if you like conversations such as this, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, and when you click it, you stick it to the algorithms. It is the notification bell. The conversation here has come to a close, but the commentary begins. Drop a comment down below. We covet your comments. We care about what you think. We read them. We respond. And folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.
Floral, it's time for you to walk the plank.
What? Why?
Because you haven't subscribed to WDW Pro yet. Nor bookmark thatparkplace.com on your web browser to get great articles from great contributors.
What?